Good morning. Welcome to our part 3 series of Counseling 151, still lecturing on interests. Today we're going to follow up after completing the COPS, which we've done, and the self-directed search. You all should have received those. You should have received the homework assignments on them. I've been getting a steady stream of assignments coming in, which is good. Remember, tomorrow is the deadline for the COPS assessment. And then the self-directed search is on Monday, is the deadline. So make sure we get all those in, okay? If you're running across any classmate that hasn't heard from me via email, it's because their email was inputted incorrect to the school, or they have changed their email address. So please let them know to get a hold of me so I can add their new email address to our records. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and talk about the strong interest inventory. You should have received that from Belinda at the Career Center. It should have come probably last week along with your self-directed search and your Myers-Briggs type indicator. So this is what it looks like, all right? And you're going to have your name there, and you're going to have the date, and that's all you need. Now, the first thing I want you to do is go ahead and turn to page 10. So we're going to turn to page 10 for a second. And on page 10, I'll show you in a second here. On page 10 is a summary of everything I'm going to talk about today. It's a summary, is all it is. You don't need to look at this real hard right now because I'm going to talk about each of these parts specifically here in a couple of minutes. This particular assessment, the Strong's Interest Assessment, is probably one of the best interest assessments that's on the market today. It's going to actually give us 4 pieces of information based on your answers. It's going to talk about, or it's going to indicate your occupational themes, your 3 occupational themes that you scored highest in based on your interest. These themes are very similar. Actually, they're exactly based on John Holland's theory that we just took on the SDS, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. It's also going to talk about your interest scales, basic interest scales, which are specific areas within those general occupational theme areas. It's going to talk about and relate your answers to people who are specifically in occupations, and we'll talk about that. And then lastly, it's going to talk about your personal style scales. In other words, what types of things do you look at preferring to do when it comes to work? So this is just your summary page, so you can always refer to it to get a quick synopsis of the results of your assessment. So let's go ahead and turn to page 3. Turn to page 3. Now, you're going to see some things that sound and look familiar to what we talked about in the self-directed search, and that's because it's really based on John Holland's theory. This is one of the reasons why I use this assessment along with the self-directed search, is to give us some overlap, to make sure that we are consistently answering questions. You'll see and note that on the left-hand side of the assessment here, you're going to have, if you recall, the 6 different occupational theme areas, not necessarily ordered in the RIASEC order, but based on how you scored in this assessment. So in other words, from the most interest to you, which in this particular person's assessment results, conventional, enterprising, realistic, social, investigative, and artistic. And again, her highest area theme of interest was conventional, so therefore it's listed first. Second highest was enterprising, third highest realistic, and so on and so forth. Now, in this particular area, you'll note that it lists the interests that are associated, just a brief summary, very brief summary of interests that are related to each of those theme areas, some of the work activities that are related to each of those areas, potential skills that will be required for those areas, and some of the values that are important or would be important in those particular theme areas. Now, looking down here at your results of this particular area, general occupational theme area, you will note that over here you have your actual theme code. Most of you will have a 3-letter code. Some of you will have 2, some of you will have 1. It would be rare to have 0, but I suppose it could happen. Again, this is based on the results of your scores, and they scored, how this works is they've compared your answers with everybody that took this assessment, and thus reflected here on your standard score. And your standard score are based on the average scores of the combined group of the working adults. And however, because the research shows that men and women tend to respond differently in these areas, your interest levels, which will be indicated by the colored graphs here, were determined by comparing your scores against the average scores for your gender. In other words, all males and females, you're compared against the males and females in the group that took this assessment. And those will be depicted by the grammatical saying here, the grammatical words in the band. But the standard score represents your overall comparison to everybody that took this assessment, both male and female. 80 being the highest standard score. Remember, these are not percentile scores. These are standard scores, okay? And again, they are in the same order of your preferences. Conventional in this particular person's, her scores. Conventional, obviously, was her first area of most interest, followed by enterprising, realistic, social, investigative, artistic. And that's the same as up here, okay? So if we look at her scores, conventional occupational theme area, she scored a standard score of 69, which overall was high, but it was considered very high in terms of interest with those females that took this particular assessment. And that's important to understand. So she scored high overall with everybody that took the assessment, but she scored very high with all the women that took this assessment as well. And then enterprising, she had a high area of interest, 61. Realistic was little. Now, I want you to understand something. Because even though that's her third level of interest in occupational theme areas, she scored little compared to the females that took this assessment. So, thus, you will note that she has a 2-letter code because they didn't put the 3rd-letter code because it was a little interest compared to other women that took this assessment. And they didn't want her to start looking at occupational titles that included an R of little interest of importance to her. So therefore, she just has her CE code here. But all of you will have a 3-letter code, and we're going to make you all do this now. On your assessments right now, your top 3 will be your 3-letter code. So she has C and E, and now we're going to include the R. And I'm going to flip this just for a second. I'm going to put the R here for you, and that's what I want you to do with yours. So now you all have a 3-letter code. Regardless of what they printed out for you, you will go ahead and your top 3 occupational theme areas here, we're going to go ahead and use those as your primary code. And you remember that word because that is how you naturally came out with your occupational theme interest area, is how you answered the questions and how it came out naturally. And it's CER for her and you will have your primary code as well. Don't forget, in summary, the first letter, the one that you scored highest in terms of interest, is called your dominant code. Dominant code, primary code, RIASEC codes. Remember those three terms now. So, you remember on the SDS that we provided occupational titles for you based on your primary code. Well, the Strong's doesn't give you occupational titles using the occupational theme area. We're going to have to do that ourselves. But if you have the same primary code as your self-directed search, or you have the same three letters, but maybe in a different order, remember we call those permutations, then you don't have any homework regarding this particular section tonight. However, if you have at least one area or occupational theme area that is different from your self-directed search, we do have homework. And so what I want you to do for this part here is I want you to go ahead, and we're going to use a computer program, and it's called onetonline.org. And we are going to look that up on the computer, bring it up, and it'll ask you to go to interests, and you'll go to interests and you'll plug your top three letters in. Then you will go ahead and click on enter, and it's going to give you a list of occupational titles. And unfortunately, I don't have the resources here because of our lockdown, but it's going to give you a list of occupational titles. And what I want you to do is, and it's going to give you all the permutations, occupations that pertain to all the permutations of that occupational theme area. I want you to, again, use one of your highlighters to highlight all of the occupational titles that sound interesting to you. And then with another color, you don't have to use that other color, okay? Because all you have to do is click on the occupation, and it'll tell you everything you want to know about that occupation, so you can make a decision right then and there whether you're still going to color it one of the interest to you or not. So this is one of the assessments. You don't have to use two colors. We can just use the one. Now, if you have a problem understanding how to do this, please email me and I'll help walk you through it. It's pretty self-explanatory, and you're going to have to read the directions, but I think you're going to be able to get through it. But what I want you to do is print that page out of those occupational titles and then do your highlighting, and then I want you to go ahead and send that to me like you've been sending me the other assessments, so I can go ahead and give you a grade for that as having it done. Okay? Again, those of you people who have the same three letters in your occupational theme as your self-directed search, you don't have to do this for homework because we've already given you the list of occupational titles and you've already done this, and I'm not going to make you do it again. But when you send your homework in for this part, because you've got three parts of homework on this, just indicate to me that your letters were the same, okay? All right. Now, the second part of this assessment, we're going to go ahead and take a look at basic interest scales. Now, the basic interest scales works a little bit differently in that we are moving from a very general to a more specific area of interest. In other words, your occupational theme areas are very general. You don't really know what's incorporated or what's involved with those areas. Well, now what we've done is we've broken up those activities and specific interests within each of those occupational theme areas. Thus, for example, in the conventional area, and by the way, your top three occupational themes that you scored in based on your answers are going to be located on the left-hand side of your page. Conventional, enterprising, and realistic for her, okay? And then your least three are on the opposite side. All of the information is pertinent, All of this is pertinent, and I'll show you why. But let's take a look at the conventional occupational theme area. The specific areas, specific activities that she scored highest in under the occupational theme area is anything to do with finance and investing. She scored very high compared to everybody that took the assessment. And remember, the colored bands are comparing you with your sex. So all of the females in her particular instance, she scored very high in that area of interest for anything having to do with finance and investing. Anything to do with office management, again, very high. Taxes and accounting, just high. Well, look at this. The band is longer than the office management, but office management, okay, based on females that took this, she scored very high. So again, this is a perfect example of showing the difference between the bands and the standard scores. Okay, the standard scores, again, comparing everybody that took the assessment, both men and female, but when it comes to your sex, it shows you in the colored bands how you compared with the other people of the same sex. Okay, and then you have the enterprising, and then you have realistic. Okay, so you can see the different activities that you scored in those particular areas, the highest interest in these activities. Everybody's activities will be a little different, but this is how the activity that you scored highest within each of those occupational theme areas. So for homework tonight, although you have your summary here, and we also have areas of least interest here, okay, these are things that you absolutely don't like to do, I want you to highlight all of the activities that sound interesting from you from all 6 occupational theme areas. Just because there are activities over here where they are the least interest in your theme areas, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not activities in those under those theme areas that you may not be interested in. For instance, she scored high, not very high, but high. She has a high interest level against all the women that took this in anything to do with human resources and training. She has little interest in the general occupational theme overall. Okay, so we don't want to eliminate this activity if it's something that might interest her just because she scored low in the general occupational theme area. All right, so regardless of your results of this assessment, and I'm just going to throw this out. Performing arts, she scored low. Regardless of the results based on her answers, if that is a particular activity that it sounds interesting to her, I want you to highlight it. So we're going to highlight all of the activities from this page that sound interesting to you. Okay? All right. Let's go to page number 5, and on page number 5, very briefly, it's going to show your top 10 occupations, specific occupations, that your answers indicated that you have interest in. And over here, these are usually the 5 or 6 occupations that have the least interest in based on your answers. Now this part 3, is probably one of the neatest things that this assessment demonstrates. And it does so because what we've done up to this point in time is we've compared your answers with everybody that took the assessment, compared also with your sex. This particular assessment is going to compare now your answers with people who specifically are in these occupations. They're like what they do in these occupations. So these are people that love their job and they're good at it. So this is kind of a real test of demonstrating your interest compared to people who are actually doing these occupations. Because we had a group of these people in each of these occupations take this assessment as well. And they compared your answers with their answers. and it's going to show us how your answers compared to these people specifically in these occupations. So let's go ahead and take a look at this for a second. Here again, and they're going to talk about all 6 general occupational theme areas, 2 on each page. Again, from highest to lowest, your occupational scale of conventional, the one this person scored highest in, is listed first. These occupations here are the order of which she scored highest in. These people, her answers were compared to her answers. So let's take a look at the people that were business finance supervisors, and that is a specific occupational title. The primary code for that particular occupation is conventional, realistic, and enterprising. And her standard score being 57, and it turned to be similar. Her answers were similar as depicted on her scores here. Her answers were similar to those people in that occupation. Moving on down, and you can look at all of the different occupations and how she scores compared to any of those. I would concentrate and consider any score that is listed at 40 or above. 40 or above. Those are the scores, those are the answers that are most similar to the people that are actually in those occupations. Okay? So I would take a look at those more importantly than the others. All right? So you will see and note that on the next 3 pages, it compares your answers with those people who are specifically in those occupations. Okay, I want to show you one more here. Okay, so they're all 6 occupational theme areas, and they have compared your answers to people in those occupations from those areas. So, for homework tonight, I want you to, using your highlighter, I want you to highlight all of the occupations from all 6 general occupational theme areas that sound interesting to you. Okay, all 6 of them. Now, you may not have any occupations of interest when you get to your back page, but that doesn't necessarily mean you won't. Okay, but you're going to highlight all of the occupations that are interesting to you from that. I also want you, with the other color now, okay, to go ahead and highlight any occupation that you cannot pronounce or you have no clue what they do. All right? So far, in summary, we're going to take a look at your general occupational theme area, okay? And we're going to go ahead and use onetonline.org, and we're going to print the page out of our primary code with the permutations on it and all the occupations from that code, and highlight all of the occupational titles that sound interesting to you. From the basic interest scales, you're going to highlight all of the basic interest scales listed from all six general occupational theme areas that sound interesting to you. And then from our occupational scales, you're going to go through the whole list of all 6 general occupational theme areas and highlight the specific occupational titles that sound interesting to you using one color, and with another color, you're going to indicate any, if there are, occupational titles that you cannot pronounce or you have no clue what they do. Okay? And lastly, the personal style scale preferences. This particular part of the assessment is going to indicate your level of preference with things that are involved in the workplace. Okay? So let's start with the work style scale. You will note that you have a graph in the middle. There are diamonds. These diamonds are indicating how you scored in terms of your preference. Okay? And you have a clear clear, and a mid-range. Anything to the left of the mid-range into this area would indicate a clear preference of doing this in relationship to work style, and we're going to talk about it in a second. Anything to this side would indicate a clear level of preference of doing this in relationship to work style. And anything in the middle, like her first one here, indicates she really doesn't have a preference and she can feel comfortable doing either one. Okay? So let's take a look at work style and what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is we are talking about people who, how you prefer to work. Okay? Do you prefer working alone, enjoying data, ideas, or things? And are you a bit reserved? If so, you're going to be having a diamond towards the left-hand side. However, on the other hand, if you prefer working with people, enjoy helping others, and you're kind of outgoing in your nature, you're going to have a clearer preference over here. And it's going to indicate that preference. Okay? So what this means really is that, hey, if you're one of these people over here where you like working alone, you enjoy data and ideas and working on things, and you're kind of shy or reserved, let's think long and hard when it comes time to applying for a job, let's just say maybe as a tour guide at Disneyland. It would indicate that, you're not going to feel real comfortable doing that. And as a person who's going to Disneyland for fun, I don't want to really take a tour with you either, because you're not going to be real exciting, I don't think, as opposed to if you were over here. And in the same hand, if we look over here, where you prefer working with people, enjoying helping others, and you're outgoing, maybe a computer engineer or a computer operator is probably not the job for you. It's not going to allow you to do the things you really enjoy doing. So take a look at these diamonds. And when it comes time to looking at those occupational titles, let's take these work style scales, personal style scales, into consideration. All right, let's look at learning environment. Hey, do you prefer practical learning? Do you like learn by doing things? Do you prefer short-term training to achieve a specific goal or skill? Or, on the other hand, do you prefer academic environments? Do you like going to school? Are you willing to spend many years at school? And do you seek knowledge for its own sake? Okay? Now you'll see that her diamond is more over here in the clear on this side, where she prefers practical training, learning by doing, and really doesn't want to spend a long time in school. So I would advise her, maybe becoming a doctor might not be something that she really would prefer doing because it takes many years of schooling to get there. And that's not a preference of hers. And on the other hand, over here, maybe a doctor or a lawyer is not going to be a problem for her because they like going to school and they like that learning environment. Down here is the leadership style. Not everybody's a leader. Not everybody's comfortable taking charge. The diamond on this side over here, you prefer not taking charge. You don't like to direct others. You lead by example rather than giving directions. Over here, you're the leader. You're comfortable taking charge of, motivating others, prefer directing others, doing the job alone. You enjoy initiating actions, and you can express your opinions very openly and easily. Okay? Now, down here, risk-taking. Diamond over here on this side dislikes taking risk, like quiet activities, prefer to play it safe, makes careful decisions. On the other side, you like taking risk. You have original ideas. You enjoy thrilling activities. You enjoy making quick decisions. These are your firefighters, your emergency room technicians over here. Over here, you guys, this is your secretaries, your computer operators, your bankers, okay? Or over here. Down here, team orientation. You prefer accomplishing tasks independently. You like working by yourself. Over here, you like to work on teams. And again, your diamond will indicate your level of preference. So again, when you're looking at occupational titles, take a look at your work style scales, your personal style preferences. Again, these are just preferences. It doesn't mean you can't do something. It doesn't mean you have to work with people or work independently. You can do them both, but you prefer to do one over the other. It makes you feel more comfortable, okay? Lastly, there's no homework, by the way, for that particular part. But lastly, we are going to look at college majors, because this does college majors for you as well. And the top 3 occupational theme areas list college majors that are related to those theme areas based on your answers. Okay, with your highlighter, I want you to go ahead and highlight all of the all of the college majors from each of those 3 that interest you most. And lastly, we're going to look at this last page here. Okay, it listed your top 10 occupational scale titles that you are most interested in, okay, based on your answers. It tells you the degrees, educational level that's required of each. It tells you the theme code that's involved with each of those. And way over here to the right, here's what I want you to do. Using your highlighter, I want you to go ahead and highlight all of the occupational titles, because these are related occupations to these. I want you to highlight all of them that sound interesting to you, because these are not in the data bank. Okay, so these are additional occupational titles that aren't in the data bank, and I want you to highlight those that sound most interesting to you. Okay, so that's your assignment. It's a long one. It's not a lot of work, but it's a long one, and you'll turn those into me on Thursday of next week, by Thursday of next week. Okay, let's make sure, and you can turn them in earlier, and that helps me, because I know who's not doing their work. So let's get those in, and I appreciate you guys hanging in there. We will probably get your next lecture. You got some things to do here, so probably next week we'll go ahead and start the lecture on personality and/or values. Haven't decided which one we're going to do yet. Okay, so stay safe out there. Be good. I also want to let you know you need to read the chapter on interest. I forgot to tell you that when we started talking about the cops, but you got to read the chapter on interest. I believe it's chapter 6, it might be 7, but you're going to read that chapter also. You're responsible for the information in there. Okay, so we will talk to you later, and we'll be getting this email out to you shortly. Thank you.